My channel is sponsored by Aura, which means we're going to have an ad from them in a couple of minutes.
The games industry is obviously going through a bit of a rough patch. And by rough patch, I mean that the profit is not quite as much profit as previous year's profit, while still being extremely profitable. But because less profit, it is actually a colossal failure. And thus we are presented with a crisis that has resulted in multiple studio closures, record layoffs, and video game cancellations. Now, I have already made multiple videos about the human impact of this and why it sucks. And it does. It really sucks. There's nothing else to say. It sucks. But today we're not going to be talking about that. Today we're going to be talking about what's going on from a purely data-driven standpoint, or at least from an investor standpoint. I've spent the last several months talking to investors, jumping on investor calls, and looking at trends to put this video together. And the answer, as I was digging into it, became very clear very quickly, actually. But it's something that I feel like not a lot of people are really talking about. And part of this is also unpopular opinion, probably from me. Shocking, I know. Who'd have never happened before, obviously. Part of this is why I think Xbox's everything is an Xbox marketing campaign is actually very smart, and why it is a direct answer to the statistical problems that the games industry is facing right now. It's been really interesting to kind of piece all of this together. Now, any of you who watch my streams or listen to my game development podcast, Play, Watch, Listen, check it out on youtube.com/playwatchlisten every second Friday, will have already heard me talk about this. But I figured I would present it here today in a much more refined, neat, tidy YouTube video format. So, let's start with numbers. A lot of what I'll be talking about today is referencing a 225-page document called The State of Video Gaming in 2025, written by Matthew Ball, which I've gone over, like I said, on streams and podcasts, and I'll leave a link in the description to where you can check it out yourself. It's basically a whole lot of data, some things that I'm not even going to cover here, and I highly recommend giving it a read if you're a person who is interested in video games. Though, as said, I am also pulling from analyst firms and stock market-related websites to dig deep into this. First, let's set up the scene. From 2011 to 2021 specifically, video game spending was truly insane. Worldwide consumer spending increased from 80 billion to 200 billion in the span of a decade. That is crazy performance. Not only is that like way more spending than every other entertainment industry, it was actually the video game industry outperforming the entire GDP. In the same time frame that the US GDP increased by 51%, the games industry increased by 105%. Basically, games industry very strong, disproportionately strong. Crash, definitely coming. I don't know why I said that like the Hulk, but it was efficient. And while the COVID pandemic did help tremendously in that a lot of people were indoors playing video games as their only means to socialize, the games industry was obviously extremely, unbelievably healthy before that as well. 2020 basically just made a somewhat gradual, but still very significant climb, just a whole lot steeper. But it wasn't like video games suddenly became a success in 2020. That wave had been coming since, 2010. The increase maintained in 2021, and ultimately the industry reacted. Stock market shareholders responded, the demand for games increased, studios hired more people. Then 2022 showed up. Some industry analysts, largely the people who tell rich people which things they should invest in, projected continued insane growth into 2022. Investment company ARK specifically projected 300 billion from the games industry, up from just under 200 billion. Some did expect the drop though, and it came. This is the part of this video that I feel like is really important for me to say. Some video game reporting, and I should say some of it is really excellent as well, is really not being clear enough about this particular facet of this whole picture. Like, people are just not talking about this, even though they definitely should be. It is extremely relevant. And I know this is a lot of data. It sounds like a bunch of numbers, but hear me out. In 2019, the games industry, or as the analysts call it, the world games content and services market, was worth 151 billion. In 2020, that grew to 182 billion. Big rise. 2021, it grew to 191 billion. In 2022, it dropped to 182 billion. This is when the layoff started. Around 8,000 people lost their jobs in 2022 as a result of the industry constricting after the COVID growth did not sustain. It is time to talk about Aura. Did you know the Bank of America recently had a data breach and didn't tell anyone about it for several months? And you think they're the only ones doing that? Of course not. Citibank and JP Morgan just had them too. On average, these companies take 277 days to tell people about these kinds of data breaches. Meaning your data could be exposed right now and they just haven't told you yet. And you don't want that. Trust me, I had this happen to me once on New Year's Eve. So I spent my evening trying to figure out what to do while the person who found my compromised data was texting me, making fun of me, because they were watching me trying to lock them out of my accounts in real time. It sucked. Aura is an identity theft protection service that alerts you if your personal information, your phone number, or your social security is ever found on the dark web and notifies you super quickly if anyone tries to access your bank accounts, among a whole bunch of other things that are only becoming more and more important in the digital era. With Aura, you also get $5 million in identity theft insurance, which is awesome. So to protect yourself before the unfortunately inevitable happens, go to my link at aura.com/Charalanahzard to try 14 days for free, which is actually enough time for Aura to find out if any of your data has been exposed. That is aura.com/Charalanahzard. Now back to the video. Let me repeat the point that I'm trying to drive home here specifically, okay? In 2019, the games industry was worth $151 billion. In 2022, just 3 years later, the games industry was worth $182 billion. Basically, the games industry is still far bigger, literally by $30 billion, than it was just 3 years prior. I just feel like I see a lot of conversations that make it sound like the industry is down pre-COVID. It's not. The industry is still bigger than it was in 2019. So we have 2019 at 150 billion, 2021 at 191 billion, 2022 at 182 billion. In 2023, it actually grew again to 193 billion. 2024's data is still kind of confusing at this point. Found some conflicting information from different people, but it effectively seems to have stayed about the same. Basically, that is to say, still very profitable. 192 billion is a lot of money, but growth flattened. While it is still way higher than it was in 2019, the point is that because it didn't make certain projections that investment companies were pushing on their clients who then bought shares in a lot of these companies, those shareholders didn't get the returns they expected because the investment companies massively overprojected the industry's growth. And thus we have the problem that we are now in. It is not that video games aren't selling because they're all trash. It's still a very profitable industry. It's just that people pull out when profits aren't unrealistically profitable enough. Obviously, the games industry is largely publicly traded. I have said this before. I will say it again. The customer of the actual games industry is the stock market and not gamers. You are the consumer. You are not the customer. Everything they do is actually for the people who put all the money in the stock market. And I know it sucks, but that is absolutely how these corporations see you. You are a vehicle to fund their stock market success. And if the shareholders aren't happy, the industry has to desperately scramble to get those people some money. This is why so often you see a video game company make a choice that seems crazy to you. Like, we all kind of know that everybody hates live service games. Like, that's not a unique take. There are a lot of people who shit on live service games. And so people always go, why do they keep making these games that nobody wants? Why would they make a live service game right now? It's because it's not about you. They don't care about what gamers want. That's not the decision making that goes into making these kinds of games. It's about what the stock market wants, and the stock market loves itself a live service game because there is so much potential revenue, essentially. But yes, in essence, basically, games were so successful both prior to and especially in 2020 and 2021 that they set kind of impossible standards for 2023 and 2024, and when the uptick flattened, it is seen as a tremendous failure. I hate this whole system. It makes me want to die. There are parts of this that I don't want to gloss over, though. It is obviously more complicated than just that. You know, I previously said that the games industry was stronger than the GDP. That is no longer the case. Games, still very profitable, are declining in a way that isn't proportionate with surrounding industries, just as they succeeded in 2020 in a way that wasn't proportionate with surrounding industries. And there are some market trends that are specifically very negative for AAA games and the Western gaming market. For one, the market is considered mature. This is literally what some of the stockbrokers that I had actual calls with refer to the games industry as. They call it a mature market. That basically means that there just isn't a ton of room for growth because the market is so established. The rules are kind of there. The things people want are kind of there. The things people choose to play and spend money on are already pretty much there and have been figured out for a while. And for two, do people say that? I don't know. There are literally less gamers right now, percentage-wise, and this I think is especially very interesting. There is a reason for it, and it makes everything make sense. Compared to the rise in US population, again, percentage-based rather than numbers-based, less people are playing games. The percentage of the population that plays games overall has decreased. That said, average weekly playtime for people who play video games is up. What that means is the people who play video games, the slightly more hardcore players, are actually still all there. It's the casuals who've lost, the people who maybe played 1 hour a week that are no longer playing video games. People who are less engaged in the hobby are straight up just like not touching video games at this point. And a huge part of this, I think the biggest issue that is happening with all of these entertainment industries that feel like they're falling apart right now, this includes film and includes streaming services, is social video. I say as you watch my YouTube video. Thank you so much. You have my permission to, at any time when watching any of my videos, to also be playing a video game in the background. If you're playing Blueprints while watching this right now, respect. I wish I was too. Basically, the games industry, again, pretty much all entertainment industries, frankly, all leisure industries are no longer competing with each other. Video games are not competing with other video games. It used to be that this company was competing with this company, EA and Ubisoft and whoever else. That's not currently the case or the issue. There's basically just an insane surplus of entertainment for people to consume right now, and there are only so many hours in the day for the average human, or everyone. Everyone only has so many hours in a day. For example, the amount of time adults in the US spend on TikTok per day is up by 35 million hours, up from 2020 and 2021. Let that sink in. Adults in the US are watching 35 million combined hours more TikTok than they were in 2020. That is time being taken away from playing video games, and that is just TikTok. That is just one app. YouTube, Twitch, Instagram, Twitter are all doing the same thing. Phones are just so unbelievably accessible that people who used to maybe play an hour of a video game when they finish work, that's their downtime, aren't opting to do that anymore. They're instead pulling out their social media, scrolling TikTok for a few hours, and they don't even think about video games anymore. Social video, TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, whatever else, is just so appealing to the average person that they are far more likely to pick up their phones and mindlessly scroll than they are to play a video game. It doesn't matter how good the video games are, it doesn't matter the quality, you are competing with something that is so unbelievably, intentionally addictive. And the people, who are even playing like an hour a week, who are now just looking at TikTok instead, because that's what they want to do with their downtime, are no longer looking at the PlayStation Store. They're no longer looking at the Xbox Store. They're no longer looking at Steam. So there are a bunch of games that they might even consider purchasing while they were already on those stores that they're not even thinking about anymore. This is one of the things that I think is going to be very interesting about GTA specifically. I wonder if GTA 6 coming out could be big enough that it gets people back to consoles or back to Steam. PC's actually still doing pretty well across the board, but gets people back to playing video games who've been lost to the hive mind of social video, which I'm sure even applies to people watching this video. It probably applies to a lot of you, actually. There are a lot of people who talk about video games online who are spending more time doing that than they are actually playing video games at this point. Like, if you reflect on the time that you personally are spending on social media these days versus playing video games, I can guarantee for vast majority of you, the social media is up and thus the video games are down. But I'm really curious to see if GTA 6 finally coming out and being the big event that a GTA always is, or that a Rockstar game always is, at least gets people back on the stores, so they may feel compelled to play other video games or pick up games that they had stopped playing. Basically, if you combine the leading social apps and look globally, the world spends 12 billion hours on social media in one day, which, as Data Reporter pointed out, is the equivalent to 1.4 million years of human existence. Let that sink in. By spending 1.4 million years of existence per day on social media. Basically, the games industry is competing with something that is like custom tailored to steal all of your time and is as addictive as possible and does everything it can to prevent you from leaving and is losing that fight because how the fuck are you supposed to beat that? The TikTok mindless scroll, you don't even have to make a choice. You just eat the content that it feeds you over and over and over again, gives you the dopamine hit every time you see something new. Video games are not built that way. There are plenty of addictive video games. We've all played Balatro, okay? But they are just objectively not designed to be addictive in the same way that social media apps are. Video games straight up are not. Your Candy Crushes might be an exception, but social media functions or is able to fund itself by having you on the app for as long as possible and thus being able to serve you as many ads as possible. Because video games during playtime aren't actually serving you ads. They aren't inherently incentivized by stealing all of your fucking time. We're competing with something that is of course going to win. And again, it's in no small part just because social media is so goddamn accessible. You don't have to do anything but pick up your phone. It's already on there. You text someone, you scroll over to another app. It is so much easier than picking up a console and starting it up and then choosing the game that you want to play and waiting for it to load. It's just fast. And like I touched on earlier, this is a problem for all entertainment industries, not just video games. Netflix, Amazon, Hulu, PlayStation, Xbox, TikTok, and Instagram are now competing in the same bracket where they used to be separate. The one that is the most addictive is winning, and as a result, funding for the games industry, which can come up from all all kinds of investors is down 77% versus 2022, even though player spending is up. Investors who may have previously looked at funneling money into games are now instead funneling money into other industries like AI. Actually, a lot of it was AI. Again, some of the investors that I spoke to directly told me that they were telling their clients to pull money out of the games industry and instead put it into AI, which goes hand in hand with social video. We're seeing AI all over social media. We're seeing stupid AI, Studio Ghibli art bullshit. Even the video games are using AI. You see that Ark trailer? Completely made from AI? I hate it here. This has, of course, absolutely impacted all of the recent video game studio closures and game cancellations. Things that used to be almost guaranteed to be funded no longer have that guarantee. Things that used to be considered commercial failures weren't that much of a big deal, or even really spoken about that much, because there were always more investors ready to invest in video games. Because the investors have left, the studios that aren't just insanely profitable are being shut down. And by insanely, again, I mean like truly unfathomable margins of profit. It's not just a little bit. It's not okay to just make some money. You have to make an incomprehensible amount of money to succeed. This has obviously affected AAA games, but anyone who tells you indies will save us is wrong. Indies are also been really significantly hurt by this. There is no more funding for indie games to get made either. A lot of publishers just aren't really giving anyone any money anymore. And if they are, it's usually with like terrible and really exploitative deals. I am currently working on an indie game. Check out Layers Deep. You can wishlist the game on Steam now. And in talking to a bunch of different people in the indie space about working on this game, I've had people directly tell me that we should get a bank loan instead of having the game be published, because the publishers are just so shitty right now. And all of these closures that we keep talking about aren't even actually a result of players not spending money. Like, statistically, that's not what's happening. It's certainly a factor, of course, but it is not the whole picture. It is much more specifically that investors aren't investing in the games industry because other industries are currently projected to have that same huge rise that games had in 2020. And to be honest, this just sucks. Like, it really sucks. It just blows to know that the majority of people who are funding video games don't actually care about video games and will just like hop from us over to the next industry that is going to provide them with insane, unsustainable growth as soon as we aren't giving them unsustainable growth anymore. I really feel like there's this magical sort of romantic idea that the people who fund video games just love video games and want them to succeed. And while I'm sure some of those people exist, that is certainly what the community does on Kickstarter. Majority of the time, it is just straight up not true. It's not even gamers who are funding video games. It is not even your sales really that are funding video games. It is just investors who want exponential growth. The video game industry is now providing a reasonable amount of growth and not insane exponential stonks only go up growth. And so they leave. They don't give a shit about anything other than arrow, go up. And we like to trick ourselves into thinking that vote with your wallet is all that really matters and gamers are making the decisions and controlling the games that get made. But we aren't. It's the stock market. Again, obviously, sales do contribute to that somewhat, but it is much more specifically about wanting that projected exponential growth and not just the profit that the average gamer can provide. It is a requirement for a huge spike is all the stock market cares about. And as I kind of touched on, this is almost definitely why Microsoft, despite knowing that they would get a bunch of backlash and nobody really wants it, certainly no fucking game devs want it, recently announced a stronger foray into AI. The AI market is expected to grow from $638 billion in 2024 to $3,680 in 2030. These projections can, of course, be wrong, just as they were when some analysts suggested the games industry was going to continue rising dramatically into 2024 rather than just sort of comfortably plateauing with billions of dollars. And even if or when it is wrong, you can bet those investors will once again hop to whatever industry is projected to have huge growth so they can get in early, make a bunch of money. Again, this is my opinion, of course, likely why Microsoft just recently announced a new generative AI program called Muse. It's likely a play to get more funding because the stock market currently says that AI is extremely valuable. So the layoffs are there to help the games industry with short-term margins, but are not expected to actually help the games industry in any long-term way. The layoffs are just directives coming from CEOs who are just trying to restore shareholder value as quickly as they lost it, which, you know, fuck you, but also it is their jobs. They're attempting a quick fix, but it will absolutely not work in the long run, and I'm sure that they know this. The report from Apellion actually covers this really, really well. They basically present that the industry is significantly underperforming on the stock market because growing faster than the GDP and at the rate it was effectively really fucking lucky. It is extremely rare and was never going to last. Past 10 years spawned a bunch of new things that were just very appealing to investors. Mobile gaming is more accessible than ever before with the advances in smartphones. Free-to-play games blew up and unlocked whales, being people who spend a lot of money on one specific game. Then battle passes and the COVID COVID boost and the rise in social gaming. These tools are largely exhausted. They don't have means to continue to exponentially rise in the way the stock market demands. People have kind of run out of fancy gimmicky ideas that they can sell to the stock market to be like, look, see, we unlocked a new means to make profit. Again, mature market. There's also the issue of the industry just like straight up not having enough human beings available. By that I mean, and this one is very interesting. The population on Earth is not increasing rapidly enough to produce enough gamers for these exponential growth demands. Like literally there does not seem to be enough new people playing video games to meet the growth demands. We have run out of humans. Turns out the decline in birth rates is really bad for billionaires. If you ever wonder why Elon Musk keeps impregnating his reply girls on Twitter, that could be part of it. If you don't have significantly more people to consume the product that you make, you can't have huge, unprecedented growth on the stock market. It has to stagnate. Which, yeah, is terrifying for billionaires, turns out. To paint this particular picture more, I don't know, vividly, the iPhone was huge for games. A bunch of people went and bought iPhones and played mobile games for the first time ever, providing the kind of exponential growth that you need to justify the stock market to get people to invest in your industry. The industry is actually in no small part relying on population growth and smartphone adoption in poor countries. Like this is an actual thing that is actually being focused on by the mega corporations who make video games. The logic is that everybody in wealthy countries kind of already has a smartphone. There aren't any more people to sell them to. If they can figure out means to have people in poorer countries also all owning smartphones and having good internet connections, then they can make them play video games. Which is also why I say the Xbox This Is an Xbox campaign makes a ton of sense. Their approach to cloud gaming technologies are really all about accessibility and thus make a ton of sense. It maybe doesn't appeal to you or I like the core gamer. I'm sure that they knew that when they announced this marketing campaign, that a lot of core gamers wouldn't like it, but that's because it's not about us. It's about the stock market, as every fucking thing else is. Market share wise, it just makes perfect sense. They are moving away from consoles and exclusives and instead pushing for global accessibility. They are trying to get more people playing video games with less need for devices because they're trying to target poorer countries. This is a shift that is very well in line with the reality of the current state of the games industry, as it lines up with the stock market specifically, obviously, which is that the current system that you and I are aware of and probably happen to really like is just no longer capable of exponential growth. Kind of touched on this earlier too, but obviously in theory, it is just much easier to get somebody who is already on a device to engage with your thing on that same device. It is much easier to get somebody who's already on TikTok on their phone to play a game on their phone than it is to get them to get off TikTok and maybe jump over to buying a PC and playing a game. It's just make that connection as small as possible to get people playing video games. I would not be surprised if you start seeing a strategy be announced from any of the big publishers, from Microsoft, from Sony, from whoever else, that is much more integration than I think actually the Stadia was kind of going for, but clearly the tech wasn't ready yet. But like, I wouldn't be surprised if you announce Stadia now if it kind of popped off. But I'm basically expecting tech that like you watch a YouTube video where I talk about a game in this. Have I mentioned any specific video games? I mentioned Blueprints. Okay, I mentioned Bellatra, where the minute that I say those words, you get a little ad and then you click it and it immediately figures out a way to launch that on your phone. Like seamless integration. You're watching a YouTube video, you click something, you immediately access a streaming version of that video game. I would think people, engineers at these companies are actually working very hard on this particular thing right now. It's an attempted solution for finding growth to mine where there effectively is nothing else right now. And I didn't even mention the monopolies or black hole games here, like Fortnite, Call of Duty, Counter-Strike, League of Legends, and Minecraft are straight up eating the industry alive. These are in some ways managing to compete with social videos in terms of hours of consumption. These few games have sucked in more and more players, resulting in less spend across the board. If you have most gamers getting sucked in by a black hole game, so they're all just kind of playing the same stuff, it makes sense that investors would spend money relating to those specific things, but there are only like fucking 5 of them. The rest of the industry, layoffs, shutdowns, closures. I don't really know how else to conclude this video. The conclusion is ultimately the games industry is failing because it no longer really has any avenue to mine for projections of insane growth. I hope I've articulated that well. And that the games industry and entertainment industries in general are having a ton of trouble competing with social video, which doesn't really need to innovate quite as much because it's just so goddamn addictive and nobody can really compete with that. It's not all bad though. There are some promising growth opportunities, to use the market term. And I'm particularly excited to see some of the things coming out of Korea and China right now where video games are concerned. The presentation that I featured multiple times here does have a whole section about that too, and about PC growth in particular, which is actually very interesting. There are also some great studios that are not publicly traded and thus kind of exempt from all this bullshit, like Larian, who are able to make the outstanding Baldur's Gate 3 directly with player support from early access.
What the hell are you doing?
That rules. There are also still always going to be some exceptions to these issues, of course. Thankfully, like the recently released Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, which is a huge, super high quality single player game and has already made its money back. Like I said, it's not all bad. There are some exceptions. This just is the picture of why the games industry is pretty much screwed. So yeah, I do really recommend looking at the aforementioned PDF document. I'll leave a link in the description, of course. Or if you just want to see me break down this whole document, it's like over 100 pages long. I do have a stream where I went over the entire thing, so I can include that too. There's some really, really interesting stuff in here. And I imagine if you care about the games industry, which I figure you do if you're still here, it'd be very weird if you were like, I'm actually not familiar with a Fortnite, you said? What's Minecraft?
Chicken jockey!
Is worth reading over if you like video games, is basically my point. But yeah, I guess as it stands, we are losing gamers to social media, and there is no immediate solution to that. As always, I just want to encourage you to buy the games that you like, and please consider playing video games instead of scrolling TikTok. Like, genuinely, if you're a person who like gets home from work and goes on social media, please consider playing games you like instead. We have lost those people. I know that they're still watching content about video games more so than they're necessarily playing video games. Shut down this YouTube video and go play Blueprints right now. And like, even if it's not much, you know, like you shutting down TikTok to go play a video game, small dent in a huge problem, it is at least the best / only way for you to tell the stock market that you do like video games and you would really like them to continue to exist, especially in single player formats that don't necessarily have to have room for a ton of profit, like microtransactions or battle passes or free to play nonsense or the other monetization strategies that the industry has desperately scrambled to cling on to in the aim of unsustainable exponential growth.